So we have Steven Espinoza, VP of Showtime. Steven, obviously with Manny Pacquiao now being a part of the Showtime family of boxers, what type of impact does he bring to the network moving forward?
Well, Manny is still one of the biggest names in the sport. He is a legend. Those who have followed his career know that he's not the guy that he was 10 years ago. But few fighters are. Having said that, his physical skills still put him in a class of fighter that few fighters ever achieve. But as importantly is the answer to the question, what type of fights does he want to take? Because as big a name as he is, having a big name in itself isn't really all that useful. Having Floyd Mayweather was great, but having Floyd Mayweather willing to take on a Canelo, a Maidana, ultimately the Pacquiao, to take on the tough fights, that's what really provides value, and that's really what fans respond to. So part of the conversation in doing business with Manny was, what's the future? Not just this one fight, but if we're going to commit resources to it and undertake this, let's make sure this is something long-term that makes sense for all of us. And he answered, he is willing to consider the Mikey Garcias, the Thurmans, the Spences, all of the welterweights that we have access to.
And obviously with him being 40 years old, that shelf life is coming to a near end. Mm-hmm. How much resources, like you mentioned, do you plan on putting into him, knowing that the return is going to be for a very short period of time?
Well, that's the other good thing about dealing with a legend at this point in his career. He's got a huge following, and a name brand that has been built up over, nearly 15 years. So I'm not saying there isn't any marketing that needs to be done. There's certainly, I think, a lot of interesting things we plan to do with it. But it's not the same thing as, for example, starting from scratch with the Charlos, which we did, 5 years ago, and looking at building them. They're different kinds of endeavors. So the base is already there. Now the question, for Pacquiao, now the question is, how far can we expand it?
Did you consider putting it on CBS instead of pay-per-view for the fight?
We did, and probably if it was a different caliber fight, would have been. HBO recently did that when the Golovkin fight fell apart. Now, I'm not sure how much value that gets. I mean, people appreciate getting to see a superstar without a pay-per-view price tag, but the fight itself isn't that enjoyable of an experience. So, sure, you don't have to pay it, but you're not really getting something that you're looking forward to anyway. So ultimately, I think it's more important that you get a good matchup, something that you can sink your teeth into, even if it comes along with a pay-per-view price tag.
And obviously, with you being the head of the Showtime Sports Division, you cut your teeth with Floyd Mayweather during his last stretch of his career as well, too. The big fight, obviously, is perhaps a rematch with Manny Pacquiao. What are some of the conversations you've had with Floyd and his team, and do you think that is a real likelihood of happening sometime in 2019?
Well, I understand there was a good deal of skepticism about that because of the setting, the way that the sort of quote-unquote announcement or the conversation took place. But having followed up and spoken to Floyd several times since then, he's absolutely serious. And I think part of that initial conversation from Japan was to gauge the reaction. And if universally people said, no, we're not interested at all, then I don't think it goes anywhere. I mean, we saw that with the McGregor fight. We sort of tossed it out for several months to sort of gauge it, and the reaction was off the chart. So with the Pacquiao rematch, I think the reaction was such that there is still significant interest. Certainly there are people who are not interested, which is absolutely fine. But there are people, a significant amount of people, who are interested in the fight. Floyd is serious about it. He's got the edge. Manny still believes he can do it at a high level. Obviously the first time wasn't, the most scintillating fight ever. So I think both of them would like to provide, a more exciting, entertaining fight.
Having been a part of brokering that deal the first time, and how how much of a landmark of a deal it was for boxing at the same time, including the one with McGregor as well too. Do you think this one will be a lot easier to really put that contract together the second time around?
Without a doubt, making a Pacquiao rematch will be easier than the first fight. And I think part of that has to do with personalities and rivalries. There's a lot of a long history between Top Rank and Floyd, and even between Manny and Floyd, a lot of false starts. And that's why the reason what finally broke the ice was the fact when they ran into each other at the Miami Heat game. And there was a conversation later that night where they, had sort of a man-to-man conversation and said, like, are you serious about this? Because neither of them really believed that the other was serious. I think that those trust issues are gone. The promoter rivalries are gone. They know there's big business here. I think it can get done pretty quickly.
And I would assume money is the number one factor at that point. What do you envision a split in any way?
Yeah, see, the split, that's going to be that's always a sensitive subject. Obviously you have Floyd who won first time around. You've heard Manny say several times, I have the belt now, like I'm in the driver's seat. So there's still ego, and there's still two legends, and they're used to being the A side of everything that they're involved in. So it's not an easy conversation. It's certainly a lot easier than it was back in 2015. But I think there's a path to get it done. And when there's that big an opportunity, I think ultimately the business gets made.
And lastly, with Manny Pacquiao being on the network now, how many fights do you think he has left in him?
It's a good question. I think it sort of depends on how January goes. Manny's been fighting pretty consistently, but I don't think that there's been a fighter who poses the risk that Broner does in quite a while. I think, in terms of Matisse, who's got, a great resume, but he hadn't been active. He had been his own retirement, and there were questions. I think it was a really bad style matchup. Matisse is not particularly fast or athletic. So, and I don't mean to pick on Matisse, it's just, I think it's been a while since he's had a competitive fight. I think this is, in terms of the physical attributes Adrian Broner brings to the table, a challenge for him. So if he feels good and responds well, then, we might see him 3-4 fights or maybe even more.